tools which allow you to sort of build things yourself. So there's sort of three stages. There are completely closed systems where you have to be in the Apple ecosystem. Then there's just the do-it-yourself computer that has modems where you can build it out of yourself. But what makes it a lot of fun are the intermediate systems. So like I use Shelly as a building block, use a pre-flash transmode as a building block. Then there are devices like Wiz. You familiar with the Philips Wiz at all, anybody? Again, that's the problem with doing electronic. I don't see all the raised hands. So Philips had a line called Hue, not like that guy called You who supports public radio. Bad joke if nobody gets it.
That's also a town in Vietnam.
Yes, that's Wei, I thought.
Well, yeah.
You is also one of the gold system lords.
Yes, no, the problem. Yes, in any case, so Wiz is a separate product line of IP-based devices. What's interesting is they don't publish the protocol, but people have figured it out. There's a commercial protocol, but cloud dependent. I really want everything in my house to be able to function completely within my house. So some stupid Amazon cloud goes out, my house still works. But of course, the cloud will never go out. We know that. So, and the other, I also have a thing called the Habitat, which I think I might have mentioned in the past, which is basically like Samsung Smart Things, but works in my house. So I can write my own drivers. I've got some Pi's running intermediate code. My home control app, which I showed in the past, is on my phone. But what's changed now is I think the increasing number of devices and people, building stuff themselves. A lot of them are still in the home automation. They're using Homebridge and all these things which are designed for automation. What I've come to realize is that the increasing number of building blocks. And I basically leverage IP protocols. My house, I used to think my house was where the internet began at home, but I realized today's internet is indeed a network of networks. It's something external. And we need to be able to talk about sort of all the connectivity and devices and things we can build on. And just like I leverage hardware by getting like the Shelly, which is, has its app, the has motor devices, forget how to use the Wiz, I'm also leveraging the internet protocols. So I run a DNS in my house. I actually thought I had to run a separate one, so I tried that, but it turns out that most home DHCP servers act as DNSs. But there is one problem I ran into when my Ubiquiti had a problem. Turns out that almost all the home routers have a 256 limit. And I realized I've got over 280 devices in my house that are IP endpoints. And that's going to be the norm. So, in a sense, the main point here is that this is sort of like the early days of PC, when there are a lot of building blocks to experiment with. The world thinks it's a solved problem. They discovered CompuServe. They discovered the source, all the things in the 1970s. And I think the increasing number of people capable of starting to play with these devices. And but we also need the protocols for it. And rather than the Internet of Things, which is a separate internet, we need to understand how to, take the sort of the principles upon which the internet is built, revisit them at a low level, the best efforts, and start to create new device and protocols. And one of the things, again, I've been pushing for is to get, and if you know of anybody, by the way, who's interested, we need a DNS branch or zone file, which is GUIDs or just global unique IDs, just random numbers, which are never reused and never expire. And that's one big thing missing on today's internet protocols. And this was by playing with my house, I discovered the limits, that we need a way to have stable linkages in the DNS that never expire. You pay once, you keep the NS record forever. Bitly does this, but you can't depend on them as infrastructure. And the other big change over the last year is Visual Studio Code. I don't know how many people use it, but it's basically become the center of software. Everybody uses it. Whether you're doing JavaScript, whether you're doing Python or anything. And the nice thing there is it's very live. So if you're doing CSS and you hover over color, it'll show you a color chart. you could take this same thing to take, well, it could be a Bitly name or just a GUID, and I don't have the tool to do it right now, but have it dynamically expand. So we don't need a DNS, which does something stupid, which is put semantics in the plumbing. We can start to use these GUIDs effectively. So that's, I guess, something I won't go on too much longer, but can answer any questions.
So, Bob, what was the local LED company that Philips bought? Because you used to be able to address those LEDs by, I think, IPv6 or something like that, and you could do some pretty interesting things.
Well, there are a couple of things you can do. I mean, Wiz is the company, but it's actually Hong Kong based. That's the one that Philips, is using as their IP based strategy.
Okay.
But you can also, like Shelly, one of Shelly device that allows you to control the LED strips, each color separately. But with WLED and some stuff my son is playing with the Arduino, he gets these strips where he can control each LED individually and do some interesting patterns with them. I played with it. I wanted to do drive-by lights. I proved I can do it, but it just wasn't worth the trouble of maintaining it because my goal was to neatly run along the side of the driveway. And yeah, I proved it could be done. But it's no fun beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, there'd be some interesting things you could do from an artistic perspective, but I'm not really sure what the production.
Well, I mean, artistic is valid. My son's thing around his dining room is artistic. So there's valid. I mean, one of the things, this is where Nanoleaf, you familiar with Nanoleaf? They give you, I can show you a Nanoleaf art thing. They give you triangles and stuff. They started out as a light bulb company, and they discovered everybody's making LED light bulbs. So they went into these panels, triangular and other shaped panels you can use. And turns out that's their business right now. So,
yeah.
The other toy I have, and I haven't converted to, the Machinima Mom works pretty well, but there's some things slow, so I decided to upgrade, but I haven't finished doing it yet. I've switched over to using, about the Intel NUC NUC?
Yes, yeah, I've seen those.
So that's the computer I'm running on now. It's an i7, 64 gig, and that. But I've discovered, well, I won't go into all the details why I've gone slow in this. I decided to get an Intel Beast Canyon. You familiar with that? It's a little computer, sort of a shoebox size, if anybody remembers shoeboxes. It's a little smaller than a shoebox. That's an i9 that could take a video board and 64 gigabytes and everything. And basically, it's an extremely high-end machine. But at this point, there's so much computer power slopping around that there's no rush to switch over to it. But, that's at the high end. But that's also why these small devices are so much fun. Because that same thing has allowed us to do, you have a computer and your light bulb, you can program. There's not much you want to do with it except for the protocol. So my plan is to shift from protocols that go through a center to direct connection between the devices, to be very decentralized. So other questions, experiments people are doing? Did everything break?
Yeah, I don't think there are a lot of questions. I know that another one of our users who's online now is using the NUC or NIC or whatever it's called. Because I had to answer a few questions about how to do a little research.
Yeah, actually, I did discover there's a company called Simply Nuke, which specializes in them. But one thing I discovered is I'm running off an SSD now, and you can't upgrade. It refused to upgrade Windows 11 on a USB device. So I started to switch over using NVMs mounted, removable but mounted internally. So that's just one little quick thing on the Nuke. But it says, yeah, the Nuke, it's just a computer. Cute. A few driver differences, but otherwise just a computer.
Yeah, it sounds like a decent concept.
Yeah, basically a laptop. top stuff, lets you build things small. The only add-in board you might want is a video board, which is what the Beast is about. Otherwise, all those big under the desk things are dead. Unless you're doing a very specialist workstation mounting a lot of video boards or maybe some gamers, there's no point in them.
That's just minimization of a certain amount of computer power. Like servers used to be the size of a refrigerator, and there are no servers like that now. The actual host, a server, is the size of a pizza box.
Well, the main thing is not so much the size shrinking as we used to need add-in boards to do everything, and now they have high-speed external buses. There's very little add-in boards to do. So the only thing left is the video board, which is what the Beast is about. It has room for a large video board. But even without that, I've got a nice monitor I haven't hooked up, which will run off USB 3. So since I'm not a gamer, I can do very high performance right over USB-C, do all the video and everything. So yeah, so that's meant I didn't need all the slots. I remember the slots. When I was a kid, I won't go into that.
Bob, you were never a kid.
I know. I'm trying. Hopefully, I'm much younger now. So, there's stuff in the chat. 56 limit. Oh, to answer the 56 limit, turns out I tried to use OpenWRT for the 56 limit, but the documentation was so bad I gave up. Since then, I found other documentation so I can get me by it. But OpenWRT has always been a challenge to solve it. Running Ubiquity for now, except for this terrible period of a week and a half when things were failing strangely, is working well enough. As a matter of fact, I'm still using Old Security Gateway and have a Pro I can ship up to. But the real issue is, I think soon everybody's going to have more than 256 devices, but every light bulb is going to be an endpoint. And so a little aside, the reason I do all this stuff is it's stupid to run a wire to control things. You send the control message and the power separately. The question is, when will that idea catch on and become the norm? So, any other questions? Yes. Yeah, VS Code has a lot of capabilities. So, well, if there are no questions, I'll let other people yammer on.
Okay, thanks a lot, Bob.
Yeah, I guess we're going to start Brian pretty soon. Well, it looks like the screen went dark.
Yeah, he's got a screensaver on. And, Brian likes to sleep a lot. Yeah, Brian, go ahead and speak. Brian, I think you're muted.
Hey, Brian, nobody else can unmute you. You have to do it yourself.
You can forcibly unmute people in WebEx, and it's really confusing. It's great if they're in the bathroom.
Yeah, you can do that. You can do that on some of the more enterprise ones, but those all have like a moderator.
I can't tell who's speaking because it's so quiet. You think that might be Brian?
I don't know. I was muted, so it wasn't on my side. My wife has a TV on in the other room, so I want to make sure I don't get that flowing over here.
Hey, Brian, can you type something in the chat message to confirm that you're actually there? Since we're not hearing any audio from you. Okay. Are you trying to speak? Because we're not hearing anything from you. But it still shows that you're muted. Yeah, Brian 2 and Brian D both show as being muted. Nobody else can nobody else can unmute you. You have to unmute yourself. Jitsi won't let anyone else unmute you.
How's that? Did that work?
Yep.
Sorry about that. My bad. On the screen, my screen saver kicked in, and now the live sharing screen is gone. Do you
Oh, it looks like we just lost them. Okay, Brian, your second one, the Brian D one, disappeared.
Yeah, you have to go back to share your screen again.
Oh, good. Okay, I see it now. Thanks. How's that? Happier?
Yeah, we can see the bargain bill of the slides.
How's that work? Okay?
Yeah, looks good.
Good. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Excellent.
I'll keep moving my mouse here so we don't go dark again.
Okay, you can also set it to just disable the screensaver for while you're on. But moving the mouse works too.
I gather you can buy automated mouse movers in this day and age of remote working, so the boss thinks you're being busy at the keyboard. Whoops, not me. I tried to add a breakout room, but that sounded a little bit more like a break room.
Okay, what do you bring in your computer in the bathroom with you?
Wasn't me.
Oh, there were only 2 people that were unmuted at the time. Must have been Jabber.
What's this? What, a breakout room? Is that some new feature?
I guess that's like if you want to do a chat offline or something, off the main presentation.
Yeah, I'll try removing it. Ah, there we go. It's gone.
Okay, Brian, I guess you can start. Is that okay, Jabber?
Yeah, let's start now.
I'm good if you're good. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, actually, you're a lot louder than normal. I think Ed was complaining about that.
Shall I speak softly?
Can you like turn down the volume a little bit on your microphone?
Yeah, I think I can actually. How's that? Is that any better?
Oh, it's a lot better. Yeah.
Is it okay now? Sound okay?
Yeah, all the background noise is gone now.
Okay, good. Well, shall we get going then? If it works okay for y'all, let me know if it's too loud or too soft, and I'll make adjustments. I'll try and put the. How do you put the chat menu up just for the general audience?
Oh, you click on the chat icon at the bottom on the bottom middle row. There's one with like the square talk balloon.
Great, that's helpful. Thank you. I have it now. So hopefully I've got my slides up and people can see them.
Slides are good.
Okay, so here was the idea behind the talk in the meeting. Really, the goal is what can you build for around $500 that runs real well on Linux? And this is a little bit of a continuation of an earlier build that was done. Micro Center was really very, very helpful in helping to piece together the parts on this. Shankar as well. Unfortunately, Shankar at the last minute had personal travel he had to make and unfortunately couldn't come. So we'll be short his expert knowledge on the AMD architecture, but hopefully he'll be able to follow up with a presentation in the future. And so I guess as we go through this, and Kurt also has a build that he's going to talk about. But if we can come up with a list of things that we'd like to do in the future, certainly I'd be willing to sign up and do some more performance related things in particular. But so the way this arose back in August of 2020, I had done an earlier bargain build system, and I'll walk through that just a little bit as a recap. And so this was an opportunity to see what's new in roughly that same price range. Here was a slide from that build a little while ago. This is what the configuration of that system looked like. And one of the great things about this, if I don't know if we can do a show of hands or some way that as we go on here to find out if people have built their own boxes in the past or they plan to in the future. But it's just a great way to piece through what the different parts are. We got some, there we go. Wow, we got a floating thumbs up. I don't know who did that, but it was really very cool. And speaking of cool, the mini tower case that was used was a cool mast. And the processor back in August 2020 was a Ryzen 3. And here's where Shankar really could have done a great addition to what we're going to talk about, but we'll work around that. The next piece down was a 650 watt power supply. We'll compare that system in 2020 to this system now. You'll see similar parts, but different SKUs in some sense. A key idea here is that, and Bob was talking about the NMEA drives, which is a big newness of this new build. Using an SSD drive as your system drive is as your boot operating system drive is just like a huge difference in performance from my experience. So just take out the old Rust drive for your boot system, put in an SSD or even better, NMEA maybe. And we can talk more about maybe some pros and cons on that, but huge performance difference. Here we have memory, and Kurt may want to address a little bit of the memory. He observed that the default configurations in the motherboards, when we popped in this new memory, might not be getting the full speed out of it. I never got to the point where I was able to reconfigure it, and it was largely just because I was thrilled to get using the box, to be perfectly honest with you. This old build from August 2020, which I do still use, and actually primarily use it for video processing, video editing, which you might not think for an older, slower machine, but works great. 2 terabyte drive, and that was the motherboard of the time, and Asus. Have a little story on the motherboard situation. Here we go. Fast forward to today. So there are 4 different build configurations that you'll see here, and the one that at different points in the build process, I kind of ended up with a little bit of all of them. But just to quickly go through it, the Ryzen 5 was the anchor of the build. At one point, I wasn't going to do the build, as John and Jerry will know, because it looked like I wasn't going to be able to get one through the kind of the common cost-effective channels. So, for instance, Newegg was kind of their lead time was a couple of weeks out, and I didn't feel that was enough time to put it together. At one point, Micro Center didn't have the Ryzen in stock, and I did call their corporate headquarters, and they thought it was going to be a couple of weeks or more. Anyways, it turned out I was able to get it within a couple of days. So the Ryzen 5, the motherboard, I kind of put a category column up there on the left-hand side. So the CPU, the Mobo, originally there was another board that we had spec'd, and it looked like it was going to be okay, and it just frankly didn't work for me. So a little bit embarrassing, but I built the system with the Ryzen 5, and it didn't work, and came to find out the reason it didn't work is because it really shouldn't have been working with that motherboard anyways. So went to a new board with the Asus that was geared to it. Somebody else on the call might have some understanding as to why the board didn't work. The CPU fit, the M4 socket, I think it is, fit, but of course the motherboard wasn't primed for it. There's another basic case, $50. Amazing what you can get for a case. This power supply in this case was a 550 watt power supply, $60. And I'll tell you, one of the best deals in all of this. It's a little bit embarrassing to say, but the keyboard at $399. It's just a beautiful keyboard. The keys are soft and responsive, and it's got all the function keys and numeric keypads that you want. So it's time to throw out your old dusty, crusty, the ones that are missing the letter M, and pick up a real cheap one as quick as you can. We go through now. Oh, I guess the second best thing in the build was the mouse. It's got Bob was talking about the LEDs. And it's got a kind of a nice little, I'll post a picture in the aftermath of this, but it's got a glowing LED light that changes colors over time, and it sort of has a life to it. The beauty of it is, when the system is booted up, because the USB lights up. You'll see a whole bunch of disk stuff. There's an enormous amount of disk stuff. It would be nice if there was a way to just eliminate the disk stuff. Whether it's cables or mounting brackets. Anyways, I tried different combinations of almost all of these things, SSDs and NMEAs and multi-terabyte and smaller terabyte and bigger terabyte and USB terabyte. You can do it all, and that's pretty cool. It works well. Of course, going down to the operating system, left out Windows from this particular build, and not only did it save money, but anyways, it was nice to leave it out. I came up short on HDMI cables. Could have saved a few bucks if I didn't have to. Turned out these HDMI cables, a 3-pack for $35.98. It turned out you end up buying one of them for almost as much, it seemed. So the memory, which was DDR4 3200s, seemed like a really pretty decent price, 16 gig, and we can talk about the speeds. The one thing that I often forget, when you get the SSDs, you get the 2.5-inch drives. you forget that $6 mounting bracket, and then you got to go back to the store and buy one. Cables is another thing you never. Anyways, I don't never ever seem to have quite enough cables. But so the 4 different build configurations. At one point, I had the higher priced one, kind of around build 2, build 3, and really what I settled with, and more or less what I'm working with now, is build 4. And one of the SSDs I plopped in from the shelf that I had an extra one lying around. You folks almost certainly have extra ones lying around. Here's a profile of the 3200G. I think the main difference is the number of threads. The power is something that I was kind of interested in, to have the thing run fairly cool and inexpensively. As you see here, the 5600, 12 threads, right? L2 cache is 3 megabyte. Here, the L2 cache was 2 megabyte. We can go back and forth on these a little bit. Base clock is 33.9, and over here it's kind of in the same ballpark. And we can talk a little bit about that and what the performance differences are. So here's what I did to do, and this is really cheap and dirty performance testing. So I will say this: the AMD 5. As soon as I get the system put together, I have it running on, kind of a big giant screen. It feels fast. It feels smooth. I've had no hiccups at all. I have a gazillion terabytes, slight exaggeration, but I have a lot of terabytes hanging off of it, and I've had no hiccups. The 12 threads has got to have something to do with it. The 6 cores, there were 4 cores on the 3200, and so the additional cores and the extra threads, the thing just really hums right along. I was a little bit envious of Bob. I have a Nook as well. It definitely doesn't have a Core 9 in it, but this is a decent system. I'm quite pleased. So what I did to run some cheap and dirty, quick and dirty performance tests is I wrote a couple of simple Go programs, and I then ran them on 4 different systems. 1, the new build. 2, the 3200 build. 3, this laptop that I'm giving this presentation on. And 4, a Mac Mini. And it was interesting, the results. I guess you get down to the bottom line on. So this is the budget build from August of 2020 to run this particular collection of Fibonacci sequence and prime number sequence. Nothing too sophisticated. It's not hitting disk, really. It's not messing with memory much. And so in some sense, it's just a processor test. I'd love to get some insight from Shankar in the future for a few more sophisticated tests that could be done where I could isolate the CPUs. This is the build of the machine, the current R5 machine. And so you see this particular set of performance tests ran for 13.3 seconds roughly, whereas it was 15.6. So you can imagine if you're shaving off a couple of seconds on just simple little tests over time, it could add up. The laptop, frankly, to my surprise, it's a multi-year-old i5. Was 12.8 seconds for this particular set of tests. It's an Intel chip, as you can see, and no doubt your mileage would be better with faster chips. And then the Mac Mini kind of cruises along at, in roughly the same ballpark as the R5, which I think this is an M1 Mac Mini, relatively new, modern. The price is around $600 for it. I'd have to check, and your mileage may vary based on what the current models are and the costs are, the sales are. The downside of the Mac Mini is it does have an SSD, which is kind of nice. I think the one I have is around 250 gig. That is a whole lot less than the terabytes that I have in these other systems, and for me, that's been a real kind of impediment. But the Mac Mini is a great box to have. Just to show you, we can come back to this, the motherboard overview, and Kurt may also want to talk about this a little bit. The thing that I always run into is those header connectors, and the some of them, they're all just plus minus connectors, or in some cases plus minus connectors, and you always have one extra or one too few. So this is something that I ended up having to go to the manual for. The labeling is usually kind of anyways, the motherboard, great motherboard. The case, great case. but on this I had to read the manual. So this is what I had to read, and it's and I also had to get out the magnifying glass to see what goes where and which of these kind of connect. Are they horizontal or vertical? Or I don't know if anybody's ever burned out a motherboard by misconnecting these things. I'd love to hear your experiences. Another thing, SATA cables, how you connect them. Are they angled or not? Do you have the right ones? Do you have enough of them? And can you read what they actually are? I had to take about 8 pictures to get this to point out, that this actually said SATA on it and what the speed was. So here are the brackets we talked about. The 120 gigabyte SSD is a vintage one, but it works actually great. You notice the speeds, the read speed, write speed. Of course, your numbers may vary again. We did talk in I don't know to what extent you have to be cautious or careful of your write strategies on these different devices. And so at this point in time, for me, they're kind of disposable, and they shouldn't be for they still do cost some money. But as you can see, if you look and squint closely, they cost less money certainly than they used to. And so in and around the shelves at Micro Center, they're just, of course, well stocked with all kinds of SSDs and NMEAs. The NMEAs are behind locked doors. I learned a little bit about NMEAs, and there are trade-offs between, speed and life. And it does seem on these you have to be aware of the burnout factor. And there's nothing like having, backups on rust. So the drives, the hard drives, the spinning drives, they're cheap, they're plentiful, and the cases that I bought and the boards that we have, they support gobs and gobs and gobs of these devices. Again, your mileage may vary if you have a very precise or extreme kind of build that you want to. This was not intended to be a gaming machine. This was intended to be a administrative, databasey, image processing to some extent, but and also with basic programming. And the Go language, I think Bob was talking about the Visual Studio stuff, which I would absolutely concur. I think for a while he tried to get me into it, and for a while I was suspect of was this Microsoft lock-in or something like that. It is really a fabulous development user interface and GUI. So eventually, after you wire things together and you drop a few screws places that you shouldn't, you then go and install the software. The question is, do you need a CD drive or not? What's your preferred approach? I think I may have installed this multiple ways, from thumb drive as well as as well as from a DVD, which I installed, which I just connected via the USB interface. So I didn't install a baked-in CD. I didn't give a complete look at what this screen is, but this is kind of what when you boot into the system, it comes up with a really elegant dashboard with all the specs on what you've got installed in the machine. The basic interface, your BIOS is now, essentially it looks like a graphical game board. It really, I don't know if this is standard. It's the way the ASUS board works, and it's just spectacular. This is what the inside of the case looks like. I managed to not bend any pins. I managed not to install things backwards. And so I guess I would say this, it's a fairly straightforward process. Anybody who hasn't done it absolutely ought to be encouraged to. They seem to be a little bit more, and people can criticize me for the ribbony effect of the cabling. Some people really spend a lot of time and take great pride in it. And I tried a little bit, but I'm not an artist, I will say that. One of the things that I did get and ultimately returned was, the LED enhancements, which now seem to be almost standard, to the point where there is something on the motherboard which allows you to connect. It'll come to me when we go back and look at the motherboard configuration, but in fact, this motherboard actually has an interface designed to support the LED lighting, in these machines where you can essentially, and it's got an API where you can program it. In the end, I was more interested in price than I was the illumination, and the mice have pretty nice illumination for free. It was nice when Ubuntu came up, really effortlessly, no problems, no glitches. I was surprised and quite happy, and I've been happily running it ever since. The machine's been up and running, I think, for around a month or so. So November 12th, 21, well, that was the day that I took the pictures. So I guess that's actually a pretty good time span. So just over a month. That's the board, that's the chip, that's the speed. The memory you can see there for the 16 gig of RAM DDR4, 2133 megahertz. I don't know if that is an error in recognizing. I don't know how to test the speed of the chips, but I think Kurt and I both have a 32 megahertz, if I'm not 3200 megahertz, if I'm not mistaken. The fan profile, which is just off the bottom there, they do measure the speed at which the fans are running. You can tweak some of these things. It's a fairly customizable motherboard. I didn't touch it, and I was happy not to. Most of the parts, which I guess I'll get to maybe at some point. Anyways, this is more of what comes in the packaging. Of course, that's the back plane. That's the motherboard. The two things on the right, the magnetic pickup tool, people may joke at that, but at $5 it was too hard to pass up. And the screwdriver, not like I didn't have a whole bunch, but mostly took a picture of that. It's just to show people that's really all you need to put this together. Those are the nice HDMI cables with the red sort of connectors on them. Those seem really robust. I have had in the past glitchy things. The way this is configured is it's connected to an HDMI TV, a 4K TV, I should say, and works beautifully for, HDMI or 4K TVs, the price that you get them for. People can tell me if they're actually buying, computer monitors, and maybe there are advantages for gaming, but the additional desktop space of the big screen TVs is fabulous. The $10 Pro Sound multimedia speaker system, I did buy it on a lark, and I was discouraged from buying it, though I wanted to. And of course, when I plugged it in and I went to turn it on, all of the front-facing controls just receded right into the enclosure of the speaker system. So it wasn't exactly high-quality engineering. There's the magnificent keyboard. I bought a few extras. It was actually on sale. You can see the $4.99 price tag. It was actually $1 off. So highly recommended. The backplane has all kinds of USB. It seems to be, I don't know if it's all USB 3 and maybe even 3.1 or 3.2 or what the latest is. But anyways, it's got Ethernet, of course, which everybody needs. And that was a picture of the. I guess that was a picture of MIT. I've got a few more pictures which I will bring up. Maybe if there are any questions, we could kind of go through those now. If anybody has them, I don't know if you want to. Coax jacks. So the coax jacks, actually, it has the motherboard had a Wi-Fi extension, sort of a Wi-Fi antenna extension, which is kind of a nifty little. I don't know if I had a picture in it here. My pictures have disappeared. I'm going to try and pull them back. Anyways, it's an antenna for Wi-Fi, which I have not used. How did I configure the Ubuntu to use the NVMe? Literally just comes up looking like a disk. So in brief, NVMe, other people know much more about it than I do, but essentially all it is you just there are connectors on the motherboard. It's a tiny little thing that it's about the size of a piece of Wrigley's gum, and it was one of them was difficult to figure out how I connected it, and the other one wasn't. There actually are two NVMe headers, so to speak, on this motherboard, and Ubuntu saw it immediately. It's pretty magical. And the advantage of NVMe, it's basically a PCI connector on board. people can talk, can discuss this, which is much faster than the SATA. And I installed it and it worked fine. Did I break the home onto the SSD and the var, temp, etc. into the? Not quite sure what that question means, but be glad to answer it if I could. Lots of stuff about SMR. Let's see what other questions did I miss? NVMe, I haven't done extensive testing on it. They're relatively more expensive than SSDs. They're relatively faster. And there are, basically, it was explained to me, the guy at Micro Center was really quite good, that there essentially are three flavors of NVMe. There's, and it's inexpensive, middle priced, and higher cost. And the three differences, the highest cost ones are the ones that are fast and last a long time. I think generally speaking, the mid-priced ones are the ones that are faster and don't last so long. And the cheapest ones are the ones that are like not very fast and they don't last long, relatively speaking. With that said, you do need a data strategy, I believe, if you're going to be using these things for any kind of data storage. On the other hand, if you're using them for your operating system and things like that, it's kind of like burn it out and replace it. M2 drives, yeah, they do. Thanks, Bill. They refer to them as M.2 in the documentation. It was a little tricky to find out how to install the second one, actually, because oddly enough, the header connectors on this board were different. They were in two different locations, and one of them just kind of clamped on, and the other one, it took a little bit more clever effort. Temporary disk, Bad Dog, thanks. Yeah, no, that would be a great idea. I did not go in and do any optimization. I do have some stats from, I did some pretty extensive testing of data transfer stuff with the old Ryzen 3. And I've since come to the conclusion that it's time consuming and costly to move big data files. So I'm actually personally at work now on, rather than moving things, finding them, and to be happy to talk to folks about that a little bit more in the future. What else is there that people have observations or questions on? Let me see if I can find my photos, because I have, I'm not sure where they went. I had some additional photos, but I may bring them up after I sidestep here and let Kurt take the stage. So I'll just go back to this one last time, I guess, for, not sure, let's see if I can, just to go down the list and if people have any questions. So net at the end of the day, it was a little bit over $500. And if I'm not sure there's anything much I would have done differently. You can, I may not have included the NVMe cost in this build of the cheapest build, but at $60, for a half a terabyte, it's really pretty impressive what you can get these days. So you want to spend a little more money and you can bump up the price. Jerry, back to you. I don't know if you have any questions or if I missed anything.
Nope, I was very interested in the build. I was just answering here. I've used my M2. I don't know. I don't think it's NVEA and whatever it is. But I've got an M2 SSD that I've been using as my primary disk since I built the system about 4 years ago. And I had several hard disks that I picked up over time, and it's an old Penguin system that I bought well over 10 years ago when Don, I forget Don's last name, spoke at the BLU.
Yeah, I had, and I see Mad Dog here, and John, I don't know if there's any way we can save the chat thread, because There's really just tremendous amount of common shared knowledge.
John says it.
John said, yeah, that's great. So there is a dramatic increase, as Mad Dog says, of SSDs, and
or you're putting them together in a network. There's 12 key components you have to look at. All of these have to be considered and dealt with individually. There's 9 system components here and 3 classes of users.
Yep. Sorry.
In the meantime, what's important? Again, it depends on who.
Sounds like your audio's cutting in and out.
Yeah, I might have lost him on some things. Well, when he comes back, seems when I talk, he comes back. But so it was probably about 6 months ago or so. This laptop I have, which is an HP Pavilion Core i5, which has been great. It certainly is several years old, and man, I lost it. The hard drive just went, and what a kind of a headache that was. I ended up replacing it, which it was a spinning Rust hard drive, if I'm not mistaken, with an SSD, and life is so much faster. But I really do think I'd urge the caution, particularly as we all move into a world of terabytes of data, and recognizing that moving around terabytes of data it's not expensive.
Well, so if we look at the 3 classes of users, moving from OpenVMS to Unix.
Who is that?
We may have we may be on the party line, but anyways, this is great. If there are any more questions, I'll take a step back.
Now, unfortunately, there's no effective way to isolate the system manager or administrator from change. Typically, this individual is going to get taken out of the VMS environment, yanked out of there, dropped into the Unix environment, and is going to have to go native and use the tools.
I think it's Mad Dog.
Unfortunately, while many of there's similar functions in
Who
VMS,
else would be talking
similar
about
management
VMS?
functions in both VMS.
Test.
Mad Dog may have a separate consultation underway in parallel. But anyways, any other questions, or I'll step back, and thank you very much for your time on this.
On your benchmarks, were they all single-threaded?
So that's a great question. I didn't do, and I'd be happy to share the code because I basically lifted it from someone else. There was nothing, to my knowledge, they did not, spin off separate threads. So I think the answer is yes.
I think there's a program called Hard Info for Linux. You can install it, I believe, either through app or Snap, and it should have a bunch of benchmarks you can compare your system against other people with, without knowing much about how to do benchmarking.
Sorry, I didn't catch all of that. I'd be interested in it. Sounds like something with Snap. But
Yeah, whoever's talking needs to turn up his mic.
I actually, I think it might have been Bill who asked the question about. And I'd be curious that basically the prime number stuff and the Fibonacci stuff, which is essentially what those tests looked at. They're kind of recursive in nature, right? And so I don't know to what extent it would make sense if in some way they spun up either additional threads and or utilize multiple CPUs. But I don't know.
I put a link to it in chat.
Thanks very much. Yeah, that looks great. So it's got that. That's yeah. In fact, I may, as Kurt and others are talking, try and run them as we speak and see what it comes up with. Thanks.
Yeah, I might try to do one of the open benchmarking suites just to compare Ryzen's against Ryzen's. I know that he publishes stuff daily there, and you know, comparing a particular benchmark on one platform against another platform, you know, isn't really fair, because the benchmarks are kind of tuned for the platforms. You know, they take advantage of the accelerators that are on the processors on a given platform, and they don't quite translate bit for bit to another platform. But yeah, I'm going to try some of. I thought we might have Larabelle here tonight, but he couldn't make
I'll run it. Hold on, I'm installing it too.
Hard
I
info?
don't have it on this machine. Yeah, why not? You don't have a GPU in this, though, huh? It's all on board on the motherboard.
Right.
Motherboard's CPU, I mean.
It is, and that's basically why I went this route, and that's what kind of makes it arguably a super bargain. It's it's pretty impressive. I mean, you get decent, for instance, even the older Ryzen 3, which is where I do some video editing and processing. I mean, all that video stuff works great. If you're a gamer, no. But the beauty is you don't need separate graphics stuff, cards, power, and all that. It's just all integrated.
Okay. There is a GPU test on that. Do you mind running that especially, please?
Yep. So I'm looking at it now, and
Thanks.
when you can generate a report of the computer, the devices, the network, and the benchmarks. And the under the devices, they separately look at the processor, memory. This is pretty beautiful.
Yeah, it's well done.
Yeah, sensors, input device, memory. So let's see where the.
I mean, it's not the best selection, but it for ease of use, you can just click generate report, and you'll get an HTML file that'll be for that that machine.
Great. We'll let it fly. We'll select all and generate. I can run this as and post it in a follow-up.
Okay. Well, I can tell you my DIY build experience. I've only got about 15 minutes, and then maybe we can hand it off to Josh. Now, I compared notes with Brian, but we did in no way collude. I was more interested in the social experiment of building a $500 computer in 2021 relative to, well, even Brian's build from last year. He built a slightly under $500 Ryzen 3 machine in December 2020. I think we both built a slightly under, depending on how you calibrate the difference between the cost of shipping from Newegg or sales tax from Micro Center, $500 computer in 2021. And let me tell you, we're ahead of Moore's Law on this one. I would have to say this is, Moore's Law, they say, 18 months. So in 12 months, we've got a machine that's twice as good as the 2020 build. And I will compare my 2020 build to Brian's someday on my set of benchmarks. I was looking specifically to build an HTPC, and part of the social experiment that I discovered was there is a huge gray market and vertical out there for people who want to put together YouTube channels to advise people on how to build PCs, and in particular gaming rigs and HTPCs. So luckily, I'm in a very small part of the Venn diagram that I thought I would only have about 8 YouTube channels that I had to watch, and it was more like 80. So what I did to kind of end up in the same place that Brian did with his, and he's got a wonderful spreadsheet. You can sort by price point. You can sort by if you want to accelerate particular things. Now, he doesn't have them broken out so that you can type in OpenFOAM and it'll tell you how to accelerate OpenFOAM. He has it broken out so that you can figure out how to run cache-intensive operations. And so I was quite impressed with the due diligence that Brian did on his spreadsheet, or at least I was until I went to the Micro Center site and I was like, oh my God, look at these tools. It's not like the old days. I don't know how many of you guys have been to Micro Center recently, but the experience was vastly improved since the last time I was down there. And they're not quite fries yet, but the deals we found online, we got some bargains by buying local that you couldn't get online either through Micro Center or Newegg, and those seem to be the two big competitors. I'm dropping a video into the chat that kind of directed me on, nationwide, these people that are big into building gaming rigs, they're doing a lot of the same things that Brian and I did, except that they were looking for something with a much better GPU, which of course would have absolutely devastated our $500 price point. We were doing great. There was 4 or 5 variations on Brian's decision tree there. You would still stay at a $500 price point, and whatever else, Moore's law kind of defines holding 2 variables static or holding 1 variable static while you improve the other 2. I think we could have gotten a $500 machine together, especially if we built around that M550 board, and been able to double the performance year over year, and possibly one other variable, but graphics acceleration wasn't one of them. I don't know what we're going to do about GPUs. I have a lot of links about how prices of GPUs are going to absolutely skyrocket. Even on the secondary market on eBay, you can get some earlier NVIDIA GPUs right now because the mining community is busy turning over to another form factor. But anyway, so my experience, I ended up with the same part number motherboard as Brian did, although his was an Asus, mine was a Gigabyte, I believe. Was it the M550? So he spent another $5 to get Wi-Fi on his motherboard. We're talking about just slight differences between optimum designs, and I was quite happy with the options at Micro Center. So when you go into Micro Center, you can get a wish list. You can show up there with a wish list that you put online. Brian and I compared a couple of those. The great thing about building one of these base nodes is you've got mostly 5 variables. If you look at his list, you want to pick your CPU, you want to pick your RAM, you want to pick your fixed disk, which right now I was just absolutely amazed at those NVMe options. There's some peripheral issues you want to look at. Brian was interested in the HDMI options and bought some cables. And the only thing I didn't buy a keyboard and mouse. And for a while there, I was thinking about not buying a case because I routinely turn my machines on with a Phillips head screwdriver, and I don't go through the effort that he went through to put in those jumper wires. And the only reason I think I can possibly get by with not putting a case on it is I usually set these machines up in a corner and I never touch them again. However, with this particular device, I said, no, I'm going to bring it home and use it as an HTPC and install Kodi on it. So if you guys want to go way back into the early days of doing this, when we would get rails of Athlon XPs from Shankar, and we'd take a number 3 pencil out and we'd re-short the laser cuts on the Athlon XPs and make them into Athlon MPs, and then we'd build a machine out of those and put what was back then Myth TV on them. Well, so I'm doing the same thing now, except that I'm putting Kodi on there. So Ubuntu plus Kodi, and then I'm basically using it as to drive. I don't know if I could drive Bill Bogstad's monitor. So I have a halfway decent television, an LG TV, but I don't think I'm getting 4K video. So that'll be my next test. Maybe I'm getting 4K video out of the onboard HDMI, but I suspect I'm going to have to pony up for a GPU for that. But that'll be my next test. And Kodi's pretty cool. It's not Myth TV gave you a lot more options. I think it was pretty much a halfway decent equivalent to TiVo. One of my goals here is I would like to be able to record the PBS shows when they air instead of having to sign up for WGBH Passport and having to pay something to see a show that only aired a week ago, but now it's got that damn little Passport logo on it and I can't watch it anymore on the PBS app on Roku. So now I'll be able to do that with Kodi and use it as a PVR. And oh my God, I have so much more hard drive space with the free SSD that Micro Center gave us and the NVMe drive. It's just, tell me, Brian, have you ever gone over to your PC and said, man, is the fan spinning? I mean, it's like you go over there and it's dead silent. This has just been an awesome experience. It reminds me of the good old days of DIY PCs. When I went in and I went through the list with the guy at Micro Center, and he said, for another $125, I'll build it for you. And that's pretty much for any PC. You can part the thing out. You can have an additional. We only had, if you look at Brian's list, we've only had about a half a dozen parts in there. They will build a PC for you for $125 flat, and then do burn in for you and some other things. Impressive. I mean, I was thinking that still brings me up to $625. That's a bargain for a Ryzen 5 base unit. Anyway, I have one or two other links that I thought was helpful. It turns out, so these gamer sites are very hyperactive on staying on the websites and watching pricing and watching new boxes coming out and in particular deciding whether or not the GPUs are what they claim to be, and if they will improve particular games. So I don't have a particular game. I don't have any game. I'm just really looking for 4K video out of Kodi, and so I think I got that for $500. I certainly don't have anything to complain about yet. And sorry, Bill, I don't have slides. I had a complete train wreck last time I tried to do slides on this box. So I only have really the 3. I could do 3 screen grabs for those YouTube chats, but instead I did the URL with a pragma t equals 3 minutes to show you where I thought the videos got interesting. Anyway, and I like I say, I only really have, my system is very, very similar to Brian's system, and the only variation is he's using it as a sort of a traditional Linux development box, and I'm only really looking for video out. As far as I can tell, I put Ubuntu 20.04 on there, and I put Kodi, and I think that's it so far. I've tested out a couple of things. One thing I could do, let me see if and this might help Josh out a bit, is I will see what kind of video resolution I'm getting, frames per second, things like that. And if it's substandard, if it's not driving my LG TV, I will go out and pony up for a GPU and see if it's a night and day improvement. It might be that the video I'm getting, I don't have cable, so I have over the air video, and I've got internet. So I'm thinking probably the video I've got coming in is going to be no better than 4K. So maybe I'm okay with the onboard. And I should ask after Brian's done with that test he's doing, we should see how good that 550 chipset board onboard video is. Because just thinking about a GPU, I'm doubling the cost of the PC. So, yeah. So we may have to do a follow-up at some point, Brian. Maybe I'll get some more benchmarks off of more gamer device benchmarks rather than traditional Linux box device benchmarks. Anyway, Josh, you have an update for us, or folks? I'm welcome to answer questions or compare my notes to Brian.
Let's do the benchmark stuff first. I guess I could come up with something to talk about briefly. I'm working on a couple of things, but I'm curious about the benchmark stuff first, please.
My benchmarks? So I can post...
No, the cheap $500 machine.
I can barely hear you. Could you go back to the audio you had before?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
No, it got worse.
Is that better or worse?
You raised the noise floor, but not the signal, I think.
Okay, is that better or worse?
That's very soft.
I might have to reset Pulse Audio. Sorry. Anyway, do the can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, that's much better.
Okay.
Now, do we need to remove Brian's slide so that Josh can show his?
No,
Yeah,
I
Brian,
don't have
can you,
slides. I was just basically focused
unshare
more
your
on
screen?
to talk.
Yeah, Josh doesn't have slides.
No, I don't have a presentation per se, but I could talk about what I'm working on right now, and then. Oh, you're getting the specs. Nice. Yeah. So one of the things that I've been working on recently is I'm very interested in voice recognition for Linux, and specifically, I'm interested in offline voice to text. It's a long-standing computer problem, right? That's a Kurzweil 1970, 1980 or something. I don't know. And then it became available on Linux with IBM Via Voice, right? In I think 1999, and then they scrubbed it, as far as I can tell, from the net, and it was freely available at the time, but I was never able to get a copy of it after the fact. There was a lot of attempts on from research labs, and they were poached. I believe Microsoft, I might be misinformed, belief in information, Microsoft ended up hiring and then licensing away some of the open source, what would have been open source models for offline voice recognition. And that ended up getting integrated into, I believe, the later versions of the Windows XP and then Vista voice recognition internal, which then got licensed back to Dragon Speaking Naturally. And all of this, meanwhile, basically meant there was nothing good happening on the Linux side. There were a bunch of labs that were working on voice models. I think there was a really good one from Japan, and there was a couple from other places around the world, and I was never able to get any of them working. When Android became available, Google spent a lot of money in making sure that there was some amount of voice recognition for it. And however, they did it in a combination between their teams and other vendors. They were able to get the voice model to have fairly good accuracy offline. A couple of years back, Google updated, as far as I can tell, Android and made it so that you could no longer do offline voice recognition. This is an accessibility issue. And they chose to do that. I'm going to hand wave for whatever reason, but I would assume, or it has been said that it was to scoop up everyone's conversations. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. But what I do know is if I very quickly unplug my router while I'm doing voice to text, it'll let me keep doing it. But if I click it a second time, so it has to go through the initialization, it says, oh, I can't do it without internet. So when so this led me to trying to find what was available on the smartphone, the Linux smartphone PinePhone, and there isn't anything. But this summer, there's been some good progress on using VOSK. Someone was able to get the Python to be able to launch it in a continuous way. So it's a drop-in tool. So I've been in the process of getting that to run on a Linux phone as well as my computer. And at some point, a week or so ago, I found that there's a way to write a APK for Android where you make use of Google's speech library, and you can make it so that it doesn't call home. So you can still use it even though it's been disabled. So what I'm thinking of doing, and if you guys can give me any suggestions, is I'd like to start doing some benchmarking across the different available platforms. There's speech recognition now that's open source, the VOSK one, or at least freely available. I'll put up a GitHub page of that once I fully have it working well consistently on the PinePhone. It's already good on Ubuntu, and I'll probably put up the one for the Android. I didn't do much, it's just using the default library. And also compare that against the voice recognition that's available for offline on the Mac OS, like a laptop, which I believe is different than the iOS. The iOS platform has voice recognition that also calls home. I spoke with Apple Store people a bunch of times to try to figure out what happened, because I believe they also used to have offline voice recognition. What it turned out was it seems like they've removed or or at least they're using a different engine for it. And they've the offline model is only accessible through the accessibility options on the iOS platform now. So otherwise, it still routes through their servers. Anyway, so I'm thinking about what type of benchmarking might be available, and I guess since I was told to talk earlier today, that's I'd like people's thoughts on that. There's a long-winded way to tell you about the benchmarking that I'm working on. So if anyone has maybe text that they think is worth playing and seeing the, I guess that would be the signal to noise ratio, right? The accuracy of the recognition for each system. And it looks like we have sales receipts and build receipts coming in. Kurt, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, so we have someone that used to come to BLU for a while that used to work at Dragon Dictate. Now, what's the? Does that exist as a company anymore? Dragon?
I believe so, but it's a paid service, and it seems like from what I can tell, it's a online service.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to be able to work without internet, or to have a low-end device or something, it's not available.
Yeah, they just got sold recently, or their parent just got sold. I forget
To
the name
who?
of the parent.
To who? Is it a big? Is it like?
Nuance, I think.
Well, it's the time to get out. Like I said, there's a bunch of open source stuff that's been happening in the last year or two. I didn't mention this, but a couple of years ago, Mozilla made a open source voice recognition model that runs on the GPU. I think it was called like Deep Voice or something. Okay, I think that was the name. Or Deep Speech. Deep Speech, I think, was its name. And I never got it to successfully run continuously. So I could, you can get it so that you record bits of information and then offload it to the GPU. But the performance I was getting was not great. Oh, okay. Yep, and Microsoft bought it again. Yeah.
Would this lend itself, Josh? Would this lend itself to a device that had a particular accelerator, like a DSP? I mean, is there some sort of a firmware or ASIC solution to this?
Oh, absolutely. There are chips that are made for offline voice. The simplest ones allow you to record, like, let's say 100 different samples, and then it will do kind of a hard-coded equivalent of a support vector machine or something, right? So it's a decision tree or whatever it is to evaluate what it's closest to. And those work fairly well. I've been on projects where we've made use of those, but that's not for a generic machine. The problem is there are old, very very old voice recognition tools that you can use. I've even used Via Voice and stuff through like Wine or over virtual machine piping the audio through, but it's not those aren't feasible solutions like on a Raspberry Pi or something smaller. what I very much would like is you and I have talked a little bit about getting a RISC-V board up and start being made, and I'm very interested in having a open source laptop design with more modularity. But one of the things that I think is important for usability is the voice recognition, since it's been a long neglected part of Linux.
Yeah, I've been looking at some of these projects that claim to be 100% open source, and then you scratch the surface a little bit, and there's one or two components that maybe not be, So one of these things is Bunny Huang's Novena laptop. He doesn't quite have a spec on every chip that's in there, but he's pretty close. And then ARM and Linaro have something called the Morello platform. So they're hoping ARM only gets so open source, but
sure.
But at least So if you look at the motherboard and the BOM, everything else is it's licensable IP, but they published the full spec sheet on most of those chipsets. So we might get there. I think if you wanted to, and we'll talk about this a little bit more next month, I think, when we have the conference. If you wanted to get into what Western Digital has made free as in free beer, RISC-V, their SFIRV line, this is 32-bit Linux, but it's about as open as you can get from from having an industry partner. There's a lot of open source academic projects out there, but this is shipping silicon, and I can send you some links to the GitHub sites that are selling variations on this Western Digital design. So
yeah, please do.
Yeah. I don't know if it's got much of a future. I think all the big distros are abandoning 32-bit, so Linux compatibility at 32-bit might not be around much longer.
Yeah, no, I know. I messed a little bit around with the 32-bit RISC stuff on FPGAs, but I didn't have not mesh or net. What do they call that? The ICE chips are just not large enough. I have the ICE 40 or the 40 nanometer one, which has only such a large capacity for whatever you call that, rendering out the chip on it.
Yeah.
What are people writing? Oh, okay. Debian still supports 32.
Jerry, are there sunset dates for the Red Hat Linuxes? I think CentOS made an announcement, right? Or
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I don't think you can't get it from Fedora.
Yeah.
And I think that was last year.
Same with Enterprise Linux and
Yeah.
Okay.
It depends with the Enterprise Linux. It actually depends a lot on their customers, how many customers actually need it and are willing to pay for it.
Has anyone here run Linux on any of the, I guess we'll call them non-standard processors? I mean, maybe outside of Raspberry Pi or your phone?
No, not me. I've run it pretty much on Intel processors.
Does anyone here have the PinePhone? Even if it's not your daily driver?
Repeat the question, please.
Does anyone have the Pine phone here besides me as their phone? Even if it isn't your like primary phone.
Not yet. Tell me more.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, I was gonna present this over the summer, and I just never got around to it. There is a relatively inexpensive phone that runs Linux natively. It is. I've sent the link. If maybe Kurt, you want to share that on your screen, the specs for that. Oh wow. It's a quad core all winner. 1.152. They have a couple of different versions. It's like a 5-year-old phone spec, but it's $200-$300, depending on. I think the non-pro one was going for about $150. Yeah, right now it's the beta version is $149 plus shipping and stuff. You can run Arch on it, or whatever else you can tie to it. So you can get direct terminal. It's it can run kind of hot though, but it has a full mobile modem, so you can call with CDMA or GSM on, regardless of whether you use basically whichever mobile carrier you have is should be able to support it, at least in the US. Although your results may vary, but it seems to be fine on AT&T and Verizon from what I know. Oh, and it has hardware switches for a bunch of the stuff. And it has I2C available on the back, on the inside. You can open up the where the battery is under the case. So one of the things that I was working on was creating a trust chip for it as an extension, and I'm finishing other research for other stuff, so I just haven't got around to it. But maybe at some point I'll present on that too. So I have a partially designed PCB backing for it that allows for hardware level encryption encoding with I think it's a TI chip. I forget the SKU for it. So you can lock in your and get like a hash out or whatever. It's kind of neat stuff.
I can't share that web page because it makes me go away from the Jitsi screen. So
Okay.
maybe I'll do a screen grab and share it.
Okay.
Fun stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, I get server not found.
That's kind of surprising because I heard the Alpha chip was alive and well in China. One of their big supercomputers over there. They bought a lot of IP from, I'm thinking, Samsung on the Alpha processor, and one of their big supercomputers is an Alpha variant. So, yeah, and that's contemporary. Surprised Alpha Linux is.
No, it's the so Brandon just posted. It needs or Ed did. It needs the subdomain www for routing.
Of course.
You need to update, what is that, the A table? A star table or something? Yeah. It's always DNS.
There was some guy local who, back in the day when the Department of Commerce ran, the DNS business before before IANA got involved in some of these other organizations. Some guy in Cambridge registered miskatonic.edu. I don't even know how you register a .edu, but I went, I did a dig and an NS lookup, and I saw the address that he had registered for miskatonic.edu, and it was an empty, parking lot in Cambridge, and so like Hernando's Hideaway upstairs above a vacant lot. So, but I don't even know how you would register a .edu now. They've taken all the fun out of it now that the Department of Commerce doesn't run domain names.
I tried to register a .edu once. They wanted proof of believe a first and maybe a second graduating class at the time. I think that was like a decade ago though.
Originally in the Boston Computer Society, we registered BCS as bcs.edu.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then I think it was Jabber and me, we talked Barry into changing that to .org.
So it's completely easy to fake a university now. I understand. I'll see if I can dig this URL up. There was a fake football game. Some online college decided that they were going to try to compete in a NCAA bowl bid, and they put together a fake football team to play somebody like University of Missouri or something. Let me see if I can find the URL.
Is there a movie about a fake university?
A movie, really?
Yeah.
The thing I'm thinking of is recent.
Now, the thing with the BCS was back in 1991.
Oh, yeah. So that was Dodge City back then.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I remember Barry was in the meetings we had about it. Barry was talking about getting a domain registered was a really onerous, difficult task. So I went out, checked it out, and had bcs.org registered about half an hour later. Whatever happened to Barry Porter?
I haven't talked to Barry in a very long time. I used to work in down there in Norwood in the same complex, and we used to have lunch occasionally. But I haven't heard from him more recently.
I don't think I've heard from him in almost 30 years now.
Do we have specs on the machine from the main presentation?
From Brian's box? Yeah. If he's not online, I can dig up one of his emails, but he might still be online.
Yeah, he's still online.
I don't know if he's paying attention, but yeah, his two logins just looking at.
And just to get back to my previous conversation, the only one that I keep up with today from the BCS other than Jabber is Elaine Santangelo. And that's really because his brother and I are Vietnam veterans together.
Bishop Sycamore. That should have been the clue right there. That no good Catholic school would name their school after a tree. Oh, Brian says, what specs, Josh? I think to the system that you actually built, to your Ryzen 5 system.
Are you implying that they made ESPN SAPs, Kurt?
Yikes.
SAP trees, yeah.
Well, we'll have to edit that out of the final recording.
Oh yeah, edit me out completely, please. The specs for the hard info. No, the benchmark specs. I mean, sorry. It should have finished calculating by now.
Yeah, are you guys there?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, we're here.
So I ran the specs, and the ones that Josh seemed interested in had to do with graphics, and the for what little it's worth, the Fibonacci specs roughly approximated what I already gave, so it didn't seem like there was that much. The hard info report, at least the one that I got, it gave the results for the Ryzen 3 and the Ryzen 5 CPUs that I have, and then it listed a whole bunch of other comparative CPUs, all of which seem to be, kind of going back to the Pentium days. Nothing, frankly, that seemed contemporary, or so I'm not quite sure how they composite or archive their comparison numbers. But the for the FPU ray tracing and the GPU drawing numbers, which seem to be the graphics ones that Josh maybe was looking at, they are interested in. I'm not quite sure. Maybe Josh can explain it. But for the ray tracing, for instance, it gives them a measure of 12x in 3900 megahertz, 1.96, and then for the
value in the leftmost column, actually. So you should get like something that says like 1.2 or 10 point whatever.
So the numbers they give for ray tracing on the Ryzen 5 are 1.96, and on the Ryzen 3, 2.53. Don't know if that makes sense. The Ryzen 5 has an indicator of 12x. I don't know what the x's mean, 12 times. I
think those are number of CPUs.
Oh yeah, of course it would
or
be
virtualized or physical.
Yep, that would make sense. So anyways, it's 1.96 for the Ryzen 5 and it's 2.53 for the Ryzen 3. I don't know if those numbers, relatively speaking, mean things absolutely to you. For GPU,
absolutely, but I'm looking at a list.
For GPU drawing, I'd be curious where these things, level out relative to i5s or i7s. The GPU drawing metric that they give, whatever kinds of tests it's doing, I'm not sure, but it's 10,074 on the Ryzen 5, and it is 6,848 on the Ryzen 3. So the Ryzen 3 is about 60% of whatever that measure is. When it runs these tests, it seems to draw lots of lines and plop lots of kind of graphics and colors and icons on the screen. So I don't know. It was actually, both of them would have been pumping out to a 4K system, so they would have been pushing out, I guess, the same number of bits. So maybe that's a useful reference point as well. Anyways, I did include those numbers in the slides. I updated the slides.
Nice, thank you.
I also included, added a graphic of where one of the M2 connecting gadgets is, and the other one's sort of a mystery to be found later, I guess.
Well, it sounds like maybe we're done here, unless anyone else has any questions. Do we have any other speakers? I know Shankar's not here today.
Yeah, well, hopefully we can get Shankar back on when he's back in town, and that would be fabulous. And maybe Kurt and I can do an encore reprieve of any further questions that come up. John, I'll send you my slides as a PDF. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry, and thank you everybody who kind of engaged. It was fun and educational for me. Thanks.
Okay. And Jabber, I sent you a private message to Barry's website. He's down in Palm Beach. Okay, so I guess that's it for tonight. I'm going to shut down the live streaming if that's okay with everybody.
Sounds good.